Hi, welcome to this demo of IBM Spectrum Protect version 8.1.15 and our new support of AWS Cloud Data Lock. AWS's Cloud Data Lock will help strengthen your security by adding the ability to create copies of data on immutable object storage. Now, back in version 7.1.7, we introduced the support for off-premise cloud container storage pool for general AWS storage. And now we're introducing the ability to send our backup and archives to the AWS Object Lock buckets. Cloud Data Lock, you might have also heard it referred to as immutable storage, worm, cloud worm read. There's a lot of different terms for it. I'll be using the term Cloud Data Lock. In this demo, we'll go through the setup that you need to do inside of AWS to create a AWS Object Lock bucket. And then we'll take that bucket and define it into Spectrum Protect so that you can send your backup and archives out to that off-premise cloud container storage pool. As of version 8.1.15, we do not support sending retention sets or Spectrum Protect database backups out to AWS Cloud Data Lock. I'll also walk through how Spectrum Protect interfaces with AWS and what that lifecycle of the data is in the AWS Object Lock buckets. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started with the demo. The first thing you'll need to do is create a new AWS bucket with Cloud Lock enabled. So click on S3. So you cannot enable Object Lock on an existing bucket on the Amazon side, nor can you enable Cloud Data Lock on an existing cloud container storage pool on the Spectrum Protect side. So your existing data will not be able to take advantage of Cloud Data Lock. So we're going to go ahead and click the Create button on the Amazon Management Console to create the new bucket. First, you'll give the bucket a name. We're going to call it J2022 Lock 2. Then you'll select a region. We'll select US East. Now make sure you do not have public access enabled on this bucket, which is the default, so leave that turned off. And then you're going to scroll down to the bucket versioning. Now, bucket versioning is going to be important for how Spectrum Protect does restores from this AWS Object Lock bucket. So we are going to utilize bucket versioning. However, what you'll find is that when you turn on the Cloud Data Lock, by default, the versioning will be set to enabled. So we're going to go into Advanced Settings. We're going to enable Cloud Data Lock. And if you scroll back up, you'll see that bucket versioning was automatically enabled also. Okay, when you enable the Cloud Data Lock, you will get a warning talking about the implications of enabling this feature on Amazon. So you can read the documentation. There's a link to it. You will need to check I acknowledge and then go ahead and create that bucket. Okay, back in the overview page, you will now see your bucket listed. And if you drill down into that J2022 Lock 2 bucket, we are now going to go and set some additional properties. So click on the property setting. Scroll down to the Object Lock portion. Now we could run with the default Object Lock settings, but go ahead and click Edit, and I'll walk you through a few other things. The first thing you're going to notice is the default retention. Spectrum Protect will send the retention period with the objects when it backs it up. However, if you go ahead and enable the default retention, that's going to give you another option, and that will be to set the compliance mode. Now, by default, you are put into governance mode. And governance mode allows certain Amazon users to delete data out of these data lock containers. If you choose to do compliance as the mode, this will not allow anybody to delete data out of that container. So be warned, if you do set up compliance mode, any data you put in there will be retained for as long as the lock is set. If you put a number in the default retention period, it will be overridden by the Spectrum Protect Storage Pool Cloud Data Lock Duration number, and Spectrum Protect will issue an ANR 3816W message showing that it has been overridden. We're going to take the default to governance. Okay, go ahead and click Save Changes. And at this point, we have done the setup inside of Amazon that's required for this bucket. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to Spectrum Protect. I'll first show you how to set this up in the command line and then how to do it in the Operations Center. We need to define a connection to the bucket that we just created. So issue a define connection, give the connection a name. In this case, we'll call it AWS2. Cloud type equals S3. You'll input the URL and then bucket name equals, and this is the bucket that we just created called J2022 Lock2. And then you'll put in the ID and password that gets you into Amazon. Once you have created the bucket, you'll want to validate that Spectrum Protect can reach the bucket. So issue validate cloud connection equals, and then put in the connection we just created, which was AWS2. And this will go out and validate that we can properly communicate with it, and it'll issue some basic operations against the bucket. Now remember, these connections are only for cloud container storage pools. They're not for retention sets or database backups. And also, we do not recommend sharing this bucket with other storage pools or cloud container storage tools, because it's possible that the locks might be different on the pools and that could cause issues. Okay, so now that the connection is defined, we're going to next define the storage pool. We'll issue define storage pool. We'll give the storage pool a name, in this case AWS lock pool. Storage type equals cloud. Connection equals the name of the connection we just defined, AWS2. And then the two new parameters for cloud data locks. So enable cloud data lock equals yes, and cloud data lock duration equals 1. So enable cloud data lock can only be set on the define command. With the update storage pool command, you can change the cloud data lock duration period. And that cloud data lock duration period is in the number of days. And so for this test pool, we're just going to set it to 1 day. Now we're going to add some accelerator cache to that storage pool. Remember, this is where the data will be initially backed up to. It is disk space on your local Spectrum Protect server. And then once we stage it in that accelerator cache, we'll upload it to the cloud. So issue a define stgpooldir, give it the name of the storage pool, AS lock pool, and then put in the pre-existing directories that you've carved out for the accelerator cache. Okay, so now for all practical purposes, that cloud container storage pool is going to be ready to be used, and you can do your normal backups to that pool. You can also use Spectrum Protect tiering out to that cloud pool. Okay, let's discuss the life cycle of the data. So when the data gets backed up, it's initially going to be put into the cloud accelerator cache. And in the cloud accelerator cache, we'll take those individual extents and group them together into what we call a container. Then we will upload this container to the cloud. Now, when it's in the accelerator cache, the extents do not have a lock assigned to them. But when we upload that container full of those individual extents to the AWS Object Lock bucket, we then assign a lock. And this lock is based upon the duration we specified in our define storage pool command with cloud data lock duration. So we'll assign that lock to that container of extents we just uploaded. Spectrum Protect will check daily to see if that lock that was placed on the containers inside of the AWS buckets is about to expire. And if it is about to expire and there is still valid Spectrum Protect data inside of those containers, Spectrum Protect will extend the lock for another cloud data lock duration period. Now, the data inside of the container will expire based upon the management class policies that data is associated with inside of Spectrum Protect. And so over time, the data might expire at a different rate inside of the container because it might belong to different clients. And so what will happen is once all of the data in the container is marked as expired by Spectrum Protect, if the lock in AWS has also expired, Spectrum Protect will do normal container deletion. If the AWS lock has not expired, then Spectrum Protect will put the container into a pending state, which tells Spectrum Protect that the container is no longer needed, but we can't delete it because of the lock. And this is one reason why you want to make sure that your cloud data lock duration is going to be shorter than the expiration date that is associated with the Spectrum Protect management class and policies. Because we don't want the data expiring off, but Spectrum Protect not being able to clean that up because the cloud data lock duration is still locking down that container. So while we allow you to set the cloud data lock duration as low as 1 day, and that works great, for instance, in a test or demo system, and is an easy example here on this slide, we don't recommend a duration lower than 7 days on a production system. The lower the lock duration, the more operations Spectrum Protect needs to send to AWS to continually extend that lock. Okay, let's do a query container and take a look at what we're talking about here. So I already backed up some data to another pool that I configured, and it's been sent out to the Amazon Data Lock bucket. You can see that there's 2 containers in that particular bucket. When we originally backed it up, it was on April 25th, and the storage pool cloud data lock duration was set to 1 day. But the expiration dates for these containers themselves are April 29th. So what the Spectrum Protect server does is it monitors these containers, and if we still have active chunks that are being referenced, Spectrum Protect will continue to extend the lock for another cloud data lock duration. So these locks will keep getting pushed out until all of the extents inside of that container have expired and we're ready to run normal container deletion operations. Okay, so that goes over the life cycle and the kind of data that's in the pool. There's a couple other things to note. The first is that since we've enabled versioning on the AWS side, Spectrum Protect will also track the versioning information for these cloud objects, so that when Spectrum Protect goes to do a read of the data that's in these objects, we will verify by asking Amazon for the version that was written. And so if, for instance, there was a malicious actor who came in and tried to overwrite the data with the same object name, Spectrum Protect would be able to detect that the data had been tampered with. So basically, we're always going to be restoring only what we originally wrote out there. Once all of the extents in a container are no longer referenced, we will do normal container deletion operations. However, if the lock on that container has not yet expired, even if there's no more reference chunks, we'll put that container into a pending state, meaning that we're pending delete. And that's telling you that this container is no longer needed, but there's a lock on it. Even though there's no more reference chunks, we can't actually remove it from the cloud because the lock hasn't expired. Now, once the lock expires, then we can go out and delete the objects from the cloud. To give you a little more depth, we can see the versioning, how it's related between Spectrum Protect and Amazon. So even though the client nodes don't know anything about it, when you're doing a restore, we are checking the version numbers on these objects. So this object here that we just did the query container on, if we look at it inside of the Amazon console and drill down, you can see the information about that object. And at the bottom here is the object lock retention information. And you'll see that we wrote this in governance mode and that the retention date is April 29th. And if you take into consideration the different time zones, you'll see that the time stamp inside of Amazon matches up to what's in Spectrum Protect for that same object. You'll see that I only have one version of this object, and you can show the version ID. And if you actually looked in our Spectrum Protect database, you'd see that same version ID. And that's the version ID we'll ask for when we restore those objects. Now we'll switch over to the Operations Center. I'll show you how to do the definitions for the AWS Data Lock. One option you always have in the OC is to go to the command builder, which is basically a command line. But the nice thing about the command builder is it'll actually kind of prompt you as you go along for the correct syntax and entries for the definition you're doing. So for instance, here when I'm doing the cloud connection, you can see it's prompting me for the next field in that command. Okay, we'll go ahead and close out the command builder. We'll go to storage, storage pools, click on plus storage pool, click general, next, give this storage pool a name. Click next. This is an off-premise cloud storage pool. Click next. For a cloud connection, we're going to enter either the cloud connection that we previously created, or you can create connection. You'll give that connection a name. You'll choose the cloud type, which is Amazon S3. And then you'll go ahead and enter the specifics about that cloud, including the ID, the URL, the password. Cloud storage class, you can either choose standard, intelligent tiering, or Glacier instant retrieval. The important part here is the new section, which is Cloud Data Lock. You'll need to select Cloud Data Lock, and then that will enable you to also enter the lock duration. At that point, we would click next. We've already created this storage pool, so we'll skip this step. The one other thing you'll be prompted for is the cloud cache directories, and you'll enter those. Okay, so once that storage pool has been created, we can go back into the storage pool screen. And if you search on that storage pool, and then we'll select that storage pool and click on Quick Look. Inside of the Quick Look, you will see the cloud type and the cloud information, including that data lock is set, as well as the lock duration. If you close that out, we can also go into the details section. And once in details, go to the properties. And underneath properties, you can unlock the cloud section, and here's where you would make updates to the lock duration if you wanted to change that. Remember, you cannot change the cloud data lock once it's been set. So you could make changes here, and then you would click Save. Another update to this properties page is you can click on the containers pending deletion link at the top here, and that will take you directly to a list of any of the containers in this bucket which are pending. And remember, pending means that all of the objects inside of that container have expired, but there is still a lock on the container itself. And so once that lock is released, we can delete that off. Now, if you do clear the filter on the right-hand side, you will then see all of the containers in that bucket, or you can click on the link on the left-hand side, and you will see the state that each of those containers is in. Okay, so with that, I have shown you the new ability to create in AWS a data lock bucket. And then I've shown you how to set up that bucket inside of Amazon, how to define that using the command line, or how to define that using the Operations Center. Thank you very much.